So welcome to the Lawrence Partnership's civic engagement program known as Know Your City. We've been doing this for just about 2 years now, where we invite city leaders in the public and private sector to come and speak with us and tell us about their roles in the community and how it contributes to the community. So at this point, I would like to introduce Tim Hooten, who is the city attorney, to come and speak to us about his role in the city. Tim?
Thank you.
Of course.
Good evening, everybody. As you said, my name is Tim Hooten, H-O-U-T-E-N, and I'm the city attorney. The first thing I'd like to explain to everybody what the city attorney is, because a lot of times people come in and they'll come to my office, which is located in City Hall on the second floor, room 204, and they say, I'm getting a divorce tomorrow. I wonder if you can give me some advice. And I tell them, I don't represent the whole city and all of their problems. What I represent is the city government. So I represent the city council, I represent the mayor. If anybody has any business with the city, I represent the city. So if you were to sue the city, I would represent the city against you. If you were somehow aligned with the city, I would represent you in that fact. But I don't do individual work. So if people come in and want some advice from an attorney, that's not the person they come to, though. We've had that happen all the time. We do offer some services to the public, and the fact that we notarize certain documents if you come in, and we'll help you with that. And that's just a service that's offered by the city through the mayor's office, and we're more than happy to talk to anybody that comes in the front door and helps them. But what do we do? So right now we have a small office. The city attorney's office has ranged from 6 attorneys to 1 attorney, depending on the time, who's been hired, budgets, because money goes out. The difference being that if the less amount of the staff, the business doesn't go away, and the business still has to get done. So what happens then is the city hires what's called outside counsel. So that if you had a particular matter, whether it involves zoning or involves something, I would hire an attorney who doesn't work exactly for the city, works at a private firm, but specializes in that firm, and then the city would pay them. So if you ever hear the term outside counsel, that's somebody who has a specialty, and the specialty might be in labor, it might be in employment, it might be whatever. The hope eventually is that all of that returns in-house, that we have enough attorneys to handle all the work, and each person with a specialty. And from my point of view, and people can differ, is that would save the city a lot of money, because the outside counsel costs a lot of money. Inside counsel, you're paying. One of the things I like to say is, a lot of times when you have a court case, one of the things that determines if you're going to settle or what you're going to do is how much you're paying your lawyer. Because the longer it takes, the more you pay. The benefit of the city is, if I'm inside counsel, I'm working those 40 hours on one thing or another. You're paying me no matter what. So an individual matter doesn't cost the city anymore, because you're still paying me. If I'm outside counsel, I have to pay you every hour you work. So that's why it saves a little money, because we're working on a variety of subjects each day. Currently in my office, I have myself, and there's one other attorney, and this other attorney was just hired in January. So that just shows you I've been by myself for a little while. We have a paralegal in the office, and we are currently hiring another person to help with the administration in the office. So, and each person that's added, that's more work that we do. I mean, some of the little work that the lawyers don't do, that the paralegals do, for instance, is the city at times will sell property. We do titles. We take property. We hate doing that. That's something we don't like to do, but sometimes people don't pay their taxes. And more than often, they don't pay their taxes because the person that owned the property has died. And nobody in their family took it over, or the family takes it over, and there's a squabble between brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles, and nobody wants to pay the bills. And sooner or later, what happens is the city steps in and says, you have to pay your taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, we're going to take it from you. That's something we never like to do. Recently, on a few that we have taken, heirs have come out of the woodwork, and we've worked with them to give their property back. The city doesn't want to own private property. The city just wants to own their own. We have enough work with our own property to be handling private matters. So what we do is, if the city council has a question, let's say that they want to do something and they want to know if it's legal or not legal or what's the correct procedure, they'll send a question to me and I'll look it up and I'll research it and I'll send it back to them and tell them, how I would do it, what I can do. Same with the mayor. If the mayor has a question and says, I want to do this, I would like to, is this the correct way? And I give advice. Sometimes I give advice to the city council, sometimes I give advice to the mayor. What I like to tell people my job is that I point to where the fire is. And I can tell them that there's the fire, okay? I was not elected in the city of Lawrence. So if the mayor or the city council said, I know that's where the fire is, but I'm going to walk into it, it's not my job to stop them. It's my job to just point it. I wouldn't do that. I think that's the wrong way of going it. But they were elected by the people. You elected the mayor. You elected the city council. If they decide what they want to do, they can do it. My job is just to give them the best advice. But I'm not in control. I'm not the person that represents the people. I represent the city, in effect, the government. We do everything. We don't do any criminal matters. The closest we get to a criminal matter is that people apply to the police chief for a gun license. And if the police chief says no to you for whatever reason, you have a right to appeal. And my office will represent the city, not represent the person, represent the police chief against that person to say why we don't think that person should have a gun license. But criminal matters we don't represent. But, for instance, if you were to run into a city truck, we would represent the city against you for smashing up their truck or getting in an accident. The other thing we handle is claims by the citizens. Now, this is probably the most misunderstood thing that we do. If you are traveling down the street and you hit a pothole, your first inclination is the city's responsible. In a real world, you would say that would seem to be realistic. In this world, it's really not, because as you know, the city only has so much money. If we were out there and every street was perfectly paved and perfectly lined and everything was perfect, your tax bill would be 10, 20 times what it is today. So you work with the money you have. So they passed legislation that says that the city is kind of not responsible for all those things. What the city is responsible for is if there is a giant pothole and it's been there for a few days and the city knows about it and you fall in or have an accident, then we could become liable. But just because there's a pothole doesn't necessarily the city's going to pay. And the city has limited money. Similarly, many people don't know that we have streets in this city that are not owned by the city. They're owned by the state. So what happens is if there's a pothole, people say, well, geez, I got a pothole on South Union Street. And we can say, well, that's a state road. You have to go to the state for that. We don't handle that kind of stuff. Other thing that people sometimes come to us for, as you can well imagine, at this time of the year, you have snowplows. And people will say, oh, I got hit by a snowplow. Well, it's not my job to determine whether it happened or not. It's your job to determine it did. And many people don't realize that sometimes when you're hit by a snowplow, it's the guy that's plowing your neighbor's driveway. Not every snowplow in the city belongs to the city. And sometimes it's somebody that's going to Methuen or whatever, and their big truck's lumbering down the road and gets hit. So you have to prove, it's not just like, oh, I got hit by a snowplow, the city therefore is paying. It's like, well, who owned the truck? Do you have a picture of the truck? Do you have any, evidence that was it? Not just that you were hit, because quite frankly, if it's not determined who it was, you don't get paid. So that's kind of the bad news of saying. But, we do a lot of good for people, because through your city council, people get helped. And so in order to help the people, they need to have things done the correct way, whether there be an ordinance if you're handicapped and you need a handicap space, there needs to be an ordinance. We need to look it up. If there is something that you require from the city that the city can provide to you, that we can look up the law and see if it's something you do. Obviously, the city can't solve everybody's problems. I mean, it's still, and the other thing is, it is a bureaucracy. The one thing that people, and we have a former city councilor here in the audience, that realize is that everything moves at such a slow pace. If you tomorrow want to buy a TV, you go to the store and you buy a TV. Seems logical. It seems like that's what the city should do. That's not what happens. The city, first of all, has to put out a request. Who sells TVs? The city would like some TVs. And then people put in bids. And they put in bids, and then you have to get the lowest bidder. And then you have to see if it's the right TV. And then once you decide that that's the person, then you have to put out for the money. In the end, it could take a month or 2 months to buy a TV. That's what I think drives people the craziest, because even if it were something that we say, oh yes, we owe you money, and we both admit that we owe you money, it may be months before you see your money, because that's the way things go. There are certain meetings that happen that might get postponed, and then that's what people don't like about government, is the slowness of it. But slowly we try to get better, and we try to give you advice. But let's see what else. We've had interesting cases. Some of you may know. There have been cases where a casket has fallen at the cemetery and broke, and so they're suing to see who's responsible for that. We've had cases where people have been hurt by weird accidents, and they think it's the city involved. I mean, when I come to work each day, as I think many people in life do, is I put my list of the 10 things I'm going to do today, and the only thing I'm guaranteed is I will never touch that list. Because 5 minutes of it in there, I might be called to the mayor's office, I might be called by a city councilor, I might be called by an insurance agent, I might be called by anybody, and the next thing you know, that becomes the thing on fire. That's the thing that has to be handled. So that's the best part about my job. I mean, I like my job because it's just so different. My father was an attorney before me, and he worked for a big firm, and he said there was someone in his firm, and all they handled was intersection accidents. So if you got in a car accident on a straight street, he never handled it. It had to be an intersection. And my father told me, that is no way to live life. If you do the exact, you become an expert, you know everything there is about intersection accidents, but that's what you're going to do morning, noon, and night. And that's what I love about the city. There is no 2 days that are exactly the same. There's no way I handle the same thing. So it's fun. I enjoy that. It's demanding because sometimes what they ask you, you don't know. When I was a young lawyer, I remember I told myself, in 10 years, I will know everything there is to know about the law. And 10 years later, I realized I will never know anything about the law. But what I learned in 10 years is there are people that do. So what I become is the person that finds the answer. So, a lot of times people ask me a question and they think I'm just stalling, and I say, well, I'll get back to you. Well, sometimes the reason is because the answer, I may think I know the answer, but if I give you an answer that's incorrect, that's worth nothing to you and worth nothing to me. So I research, because something even I do all the time, laws change, things change. The next day, the legislature might have passed something that made what I say completely wrong. So I want to give the correct answer. So what we do is we take a look at it and we make sure. And so, I know that's a little frustrating for people at sometimes, because they think, well, you're the lawyer, you're supposed to know everything. But in reality, what we know is we know how to find the answers, and then hopefully at the end we give you the answer that's correct. I don't know if there was any questions for us before I keep rambling, but I can keep telling you anything. Go ahead.
Do you represent the school department and the school committee as well?
Yes and no, which is interesting. I represent them when it comes to contract disputes. So one of the other major things that part of my job that I do is that on any given day, I am probably reviewing 40 contracts for the city. And these are for, could be purchasing TVs. It could be building a school for $20, $40, $60 million. It could be changing the heating system in City Hall. It could be anything, but I have to review these contracts. So for the school, you would be, I don't think you would be surprised. You would be surprised at how many contracts your schools enter into. They enter into for further education for the teachers. They enter into electronics. They enter into supplies. Everything that they buy has to be with a contract, and it's a slow process. So if you need pens next year, you better order them this year. If you need computers, you better order them this year. So the school department, it's a lot of contracts and they go over time, and it's a lot of specialized skills. For instance, we have such a diverse population in this city, and they require so many things, and sometimes it's special ed, sometimes it's language-based, whatever it is, and you may not have teachers with that expertise, so they have to bring in, thus they enter into contracts so that we can serve everybody that comes in. So with the schools, I don't represent them like you would say, do I represent the school committee? No. Do I review a lot of stuff that they do? Yes. Do I review a lot of their contracts? Definitely. And that's just the flavor of the day. Go ahead.
Do you oversee all the union contracts? Do you do the negotiations?
I do not do negotiations. Is something I do not do. That is done by the CAFO, which is the Chief Financial Officer. That is one of the areas that we're looking to bring back into the city attorney's office, but we hire outside counsel. So we hire someone who specializes in contracts, and they deal with that, but they deal directly. For instance, the people are aware that the police contract was just settled. But that took years. I mean, that's a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of back and forth, people listening, demands change. What's required in there, what's not required in there. So it's a long process. I mean, we're seeing it all over these, and hopefully not soon in Lawrence, the strike by teachers, because their contracts are very, very involved. There's a lot of things going on. And what you find, which is kind of the frustrating part, is that sometimes let's say with the police, you enter into a 3-year contract, but you've been negotiating so long that you're in the 3rd year. So by the time you sign the contract, you have to negotiate a new one the next year because you're into the 3rd year of the contract. So it can get people would like it. I mean, we would like it to operate like, if you need a contract, we'll get negotiating, we'll get it done. It doesn't happen that way. People have, obviously the police have jobs to do, so they can't always be in a contracting session. The CAFO has things to do and has many different contracts to go over. So, and sometimes people need time to cool off because when people meet, people are passionate about what they love. The schools are very passionate about teaching. The police are very passionate about police work. And they also are passionate about their people. And so when you say, well, we don't want to pay them, sometimes it becomes personal. People go like, hey, wait a minute, these are good people, why aren't you paying them? And when the city is basically like, we would love to pay them, but we also have the people that can't afford to pay taxes. And if we go to them and say, now you've got to pay double, their life, style is going to change, and can they afford to live in the city? So, there's a lot of give and take, but I find it interesting, but it also is very frustrating. And I know people on the outside, you're just like, why aren't these contracts signed? Why don't we get things done? And it's just, that's what happens.
Do you, when the city council or the school committee passes ordinances or local regulations, do you have to review them to make sure that they're legal?
Yeah, so not when they pass them. I have to look them over before they pass them because
that process works?
It's too late. So what will happen is that the way things happen in the city is that you take a matter, let's say that you decide, I'm going to use something simple, like you want a handicap spot outside your house. So you would contact your local city councilor and you would say, hey, I would like to have a handicap spot outside my house. And the city council would then present that as an ordinance. Well, then what happens is somebody has to do some research. Are you really handicapped? I mean, I hate to say that, but that's the first thing you have to check. Are you really handicapped? Second of all is there a handicap spot there already? You know, third is the street entirely handicapped? Do we need, you know, because you like to service people, but there's also a city. If I believe at right now, and I don't hold me to this number, but I believe it's 15% of the entire community of Lawrence would qualify as being handicapped. So if you just think if 15% of this all drove and all needed a handicap spot, there would be no parking in the city. So there has to be concerns like, where is this locating? What street is it on? Is there something else? So then it would come to me. I'm sorry I took that route, but then it comes to me and I look at it. After it's been reviewed by, let's say, the engineer, the police department, the fire department, and it's determined that this is a great location. I go over the language, and I make sure that the language is legal. Once I do that, I resubmit it to the city council. The city council then brings it back forward from their committee to the full membership, and they vote on it, up or down, and they're free to do whichever they want. Again, they are the elected officials. They are the ones that make decisions. All I do is prepare the material for them. But you know, it's interesting because there's ordinances, you know, which streets are one way. Everything in the city has an ordinance. It's, you know, Jones Street one way is because someone asked it to be one way. Maple Street being two way is because someone asked it to be two ways. You know, how wide the streets are, your zoning. There's rules and regulations for everything. The city is not haphazardly done. I know some people think it is, but it's the way, there's an order to it, and there's a mechanism for almost everything that you have to do. Right?
So you were talking about the potholes earlier, and the city has a limit on how much they pay for their liability with potholes, don't they?
Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't call it a limit on the liability, limit on the amount of money.
Yeah.
So my last year budget for the year to pay potholes for Bayhall was $1,000. That doesn't pay a lot of things. Now, that's not saying I can go over and above it, but I'm saying that was my budget. The problem being that, quite frankly, is that I drive a Honda Civic. I hit a pothole, it might be $200. You might drive a Mercedes 550 with beautiful wheels and everything, and you hitting the pothole might be $3,000. The city just can't afford that kind of thing. So,
right, so let us just say, for the sake of argument, that there's a pothole on Main Street, and everybody in the whole entire community, and everybody at DPW, and the mayor, and you, and everybody knows it was there, and it just got ignored. So then somebody comes by, driving their Mercedes, lawfully, not speeding, hits it, and it's got a $5,000 suspension, new wheels, and what have you. How does the city handle that? How do they get out of paying $500 and not the $3,000 or the $5,000 next to it?
we have a cap.
That's fine.
Oh, yeah, we have a cap on the amount. And plus, we tell people to apply for their own insurance first. I will have to say, and I know people are going to doubt me on this, is when the DPW, anytime I've informed the DPW that we've had a pothole claim, they've been out there within 4 hours to look at it. First of all, because I need them to look at it. Is there, in fact, a pothole there? And they've fixed it, unless there's some extraordinary measure. The other day, someone complained about a pothole, and I had to laugh because the mayor is very hands-on. The mayor was out at the pothole, and the DPW director was out of the, I'm like, not workers, the two heads of the department, and that pothole was filled within like 3 to 4 hours. So the city is designed to help people, but you can't get to everything. It's like snow plowing. It's people say, "Oh, my street hasn't been plowed." Well, it depends. There's a lot of plowing to be done, and I hate to say this, and probably people will criticize. There is really a priority. It's roads that lead to the hospitals get done first, around police stations, around fire stations. Your street may not be that well used, and you might be the last, depending on the type of snow and snowstorm, you might not be used. The other thing that people don't realize is how often the DPW is out when it's not snowing. We have a lot of streets in this city that are hills, as I'm not giving anybody new information. And the problem is that at night, a lot of times, they weep. The water comes off the hills, the water comes down. So in the morning, what you have is these just slick ice. So people say, geez, how's the DPW budget so big? Well, they're outstanding, so when you get up in the morning, that's not something that you have to deal with. They realize that, Tower Hill or this street is going to be tough in the morning, regardless of whether we had snow or not, because of the problem with the water. Did you have, no?
This happened to me in the state of Delaware. I sliced a tire. I made a claim to the state of Delaware, and they claimed sovereign immunity. Does the city fall back on that if they do not know about the hazard in the road?
Well, the law is very clear. Is the city must have actual knowledge of the problem.
Okay, I refer to potholes at potholes@cityoflawrence.com. If I fulfilled my duties and of notifying the DPW that a defect in their road is there.
For the next guy, not for you.
Well,
You can't hit it and then report it.
potholes never mind. No, it looks like I'm driving drunk, but I'm doing potholes.
Yeah. Yes.
Again, the fact that they have been notified by email.
Right. That puts them on notice. Now, they do have a certain, you call it 2 a.m., and then at 3 a.m. somebody hits it. It's not realistic that the DPW is going to get out there. There has to be so much time to fix it.
So I have a quick question. When us citizens, taxpayers pay our excise tax, isn't that supposed to be to cover like road maintenance and all that? So if I run into a pothole and my wheel breaks, isn't that supposed to be like covered for the money that we pay for our excise tax?
No.
No?
The road maintenance is, but not paying you for pothole damage, no.
But if you suffer damage to your vehicle because the road is not well maintained, why couldn't you get paid for the money that you pay every year for excise taxes?
Well, there's many things that go into it, and I'm going to give you what most people don't like to hear. How do I know you hit that pothole? How do I know you didn't hit a pothole in Methuen, but now you're coming back and your car's limping, and all of a sudden you say, oh, it must have been the pothole over here. Or, there's plenty of potholes there. So that we don't pay out just because, I hate to say it because people say that happened. We have to know what happened. We have to, there has to be some sort of proof. You have to kind of prove that that was it and there was notice.
If I go into a pothole, my wheel bends, I get out of my car, take a picture with my cell phone, and I go and say, this happened on this street.
Right.
I can document it.
Then, as long as the city had knowledge of that. See, potholes occur at any time. Obviously, if you drive down the street one day, the next day there could be a pothole there. So the city has to be on knowledge of it. Now, if much like
If you hit the pothole that I turned into the
city, yes.
you would be
But there's a limit of what you're.
as a cap.
There's a cap on what you're going to get paid because, if you're, unfortunately, if you're driving a Rolls Royce, we're not paying you for that wheel if it's, $10,000 for the wheel.
Might get $250.
So,
Some contribution.
I would like to hear more about your background, specifically how long you've been in Lawrence and how long you have been the city attorney of Lawrence.
So my background is I've been an attorney for 40 years. I had my own private practice for 34 of those years. I came to the city 5 years ago. I came in as the first assistant. I worked as a first assistant for 3.5 years, and then at the time I worked there were two attorneys. There was the city attorney, who was Raquel Ruano. Raquel was a wonderful attorney, and unfortunately too wonderful, so I appointed her a judge. So, so she became a judge, and at that point I became the acting city attorney. So I was the acting city attorney for about 6 months, and then I was appointed the attorney, and I've been the city attorney for about a year now, well, probably a year and a half if I mix out the dates. And I'm slowly trying to add on to the people and get them in there. My background was which makes it perfect for this job, is I did a little bit of everything. I did a small practice. I was the only attorney. I operated and I did a little bit of civil, did a little of criminal. I've done, when you're an attorney, you do enough things over time that you learn a little of everything. But at one point, I could brag that I had been in every district superior court east of Worcester, and 60% of them west of Worcester. And I mean, they used to be small courts. Amesbury used to have a court that was above their police station. It's no longer there. It's now moved to Amesbury. But there are a lot of interesting courts. But that was my background. The funny part is, what I like to say is, it scares off a lot of people to say a city attorney, because they think that, you just have to have so specialized knowledge. Because we've been looking for attorneys for so long. And I like to say, no, it's really kind of everything that you do, it's just wrapped up. And you can learn what you need to learn. But, it is different in that you are dealing with a city, you are dealing with, the city council, you're dealing with a mayor. And I'm not saying that it's political, but there's always politics involved. So that's probably the part that scares most people about it, is that, but as everybody I've ever talked to, whether it's a city councilor or a mayor of any, all they ever tell me is, I want your advice, but tell me if it's illegal. Because nobody wants to go against that. They want to do what they want to do, but nobody wants to fall, short of the law. Go ahead.
Jim, I appreciate you today. You're really not that scary, man. But welcome to City of Lawrence Public Library. My question is, the city owns this library, correct?
Yes.
And the Board of Trustees mandates to dictate all policies regarding this library.
Right.
Do you have any input on the legal aspects of the policies or policy changes? Or the city has, the Board of Trustees outline that they can do what they want regarding this public facility, regarding policies, regulations?
Well, remember, it was set up to be separate. It's set up so that they can run it and be free from the political aspect of it. That's why, and this library, as opposed to many other libraries, is unique in that it was set up by a private group, and that's, you hear, I don't know if you've heard of or know of the White Fund, and so that's how this was developed. It was, back in the day, back in the Essex Company owned most of Lawrence, rich people decided that, hey, we needed to give back to the city, and said, what helps people is a library. So they set up this board. And the board is supposed to be separate. Now, obviously, there are members that are appointed by the mayor, and there's members that aren't. So, no, does the city run the library? No, the library runs it. The library has directors, the library has a board. Clearly, if the library board decided to do something that was illegal, or the city would get involved. But the day-to-day operation, that's what the director is for. That's what the board of directors is for. And there's many such groups in the city that you try to just cull it out, because it's just more efficient if a board handles it. That's why you have a planning board, any of those type of boards, because it's just more efficient to run a city with a small group than it is to a particular area. So, yeah, no, we don't review. Will your library director ever call me and say, hey, can you tell me something about that? All the time. Advice, we have a great working relationship as far as that does. But, as I like to say with anything, we get involved in the big picture. We don't get involved in the day-to-day. day-to-day is for the people that work here.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you could talk about the requirements to become a city attorney and who is part of the process of the hiring and who makes the final decision.
So to be the city, first of all, the way it usually happens is that you're a lawyer and you go get a job either at a city or at a town as an assistant attorney. And you kind of learn the job from that point. So if there's an opening in the city attorney, let's just say I were to leave tomorrow. What would happen is they would put an ad out, and the ad would run in legal newspapers. It would run locally. It would run, you would send it to all towns and cities because we belong to a group of city attorneys, so we would send out and would say, like, there's an opening in Lawrence. If you're interested in Lawrence, here's what we require. And you might be the assistant in Worcester and might feel, you know what, I have enough information. I could become the city attorney in Lawrence. And you would apply. And what happens at that point is that all those are put in. You can kind of cull out it. I'll give you a classic example. We were looking for a city clerk in the city of Lawrence, and we asked for resumes. We had to throw out about 300 of them, and you know why? They were clerks at 7-Eleven. They saw a clerk, they applied for the clerk's job. So sometimes, just because you're applying for the job, I mean, and I don't understand it. I've seen resumes from attorneys that are in Florida applying for a job in Lawrence. And my first question is, when are you moving? Or why are you doing that? So you cull out the ones that you think aren't realistic. I mean, sometimes people belong to search engines. Like if I'm a lawyer and I'm looking for a job, I belong to a company and I put my resume in there. Well, they want to tell you that they have sent it to 300 jobs. So sometimes they send them to jobs that you don't want. So our job is just to cull out. So then you get down to, let's say, 5 or 10 candidates that you think are really good. And then you're interviewed by the mayor, and the mayor takes a look at you and sees, because obviously I have to work hand in glove with the mayor and I have to work hand in glove with the city council. And then what happens is, let's say the mayor decides, I like that person. That doesn't mean you're the city attorney. You then have to be presented to the city council. And the city council obviously looks at your record, looks at what you've done, goes over your background and everything, and then if they both agree, then you become the city attorney. If either one doesn't agree, then you don't become the city attorney. So that, it really is, that's the way the system is. The checks and balances, much like in the federal government, that the mayor's office and the city council has to work together, because that's how the city runs. Sure.
She mentioned the application process. I've come across several job openings for the city, and it was posted, and the closing date was either 2 or 3 week period. How can the city expect to get qualified people? Are they advertising before the job posting is going to the public? Are they putting it into the trade periodicals?
Sometimes in certain jobs, you already know what's going to happen. For instance, I may have no openings in my office right now, but I might have 10 resumes sitting there because people send them in. So when you realize, hey, this is going to get filled right away, we have people. So just because you only open it for 2 weeks, there might be 5 people just that are completely qualified, and you're like, well, we have job applicants. Sometimes not. Sometimes I've seen postings that stay open for years and never a qualified candidate became.
As a former member of the personnel committee, I went through some of the resumes, and there was some, as you said, there were some sweethearts in there.
No, people misunderstand. They saw a clerk position.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, if there's nothing else, let's go give Tim a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So much for comments.
No, it was my pleasure. That was fun.